Welcome to Thought to Action, presented by the London Center for Policy Research, where we delve deeply into important issues, examine ideas, and discuss solutions, and put forth thoughts to action. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, President of the London Center. If you like our videos and our discussions, please subscribe to our Patreon community, and be sure and like this video, share it. It's the best thing you can do to help us. And subscribe to everything we're doing via Thought to Action on our YouTube channel, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and our website, londoncenter.org. And so with that done, I'd like to welcome to our discussion today, Ambassador Hank Cooper. Ambassador Hank Cooper ran the Strategic Defense Initiative. He is one of my dearest friends and mentors. We've worked on a number of key projects over the years. And what we're going to be talking about today is focused on, I think, what has been a largely ignored but continuously examined threat called electromagnetic pulse, EMP. And what I find ironic, and Hank, thank you for being here today, and thank you for participating. And by the way, Hank, full disclosure, Hank Cooper is on our board of directors for the London Center. But Hank, what I find ironic as we start discussing this today is the issue of cyber, the overlap of cyber and EMP, and how the fact is, you know, I have my son who plays games where EMP is a clear threat and weapon, and yet somehow our government can't figure out that this is something we should be looking into. So thanks for being on. And what do you think of that?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, and furthermore, we've understood that this is a severe threat for decades, since the mid-1960s. And the military, at least for some of our most important systems, our strategic systems, paid careful attention to those systems, the Minuteman, the bombers, the undersea submarines with their SLBMs, as well as all the command and control that assures the president stays in control of all these matters, was protected against EMP. So right. We know how to protect our critical civil infrastructure as well, but we never did. That's because during the Cold War, the idea was that if the Soviets ever attacked us with nuclear weapons, we would do the same to them and destroy them. And we had something called mutual assured destruction, or right. MAD doctrine. And until Ronald Reagan came along, that was the sole protection we had. Reagan wanted to do defenses as well to protect the American people. And the Strategic Defense Initiative, which you mentioned, was what he began in 1983. It was the reason I'm called an ambassador. I was his chief negotiator in our talks with the Soviet Union on these matters, protecting his SDI program. And then I later ran that program, and we learned how to protect the nation, 30 something years ago. But when the Clinton administration came in, they so-called took the stars out of Star Wars. Yeah. The label Ted Kennedy gave us right after the election, right after Reagan's speech in 1983. And they did. They basically gutted the SDI program, all of the space stuff in particular, but all the technologies, and regrettably, most important technologies no longer are being pursued in the United States. China actually, along with a lot of other things, as is now well understood, I don't know whether you say stole or just captured that technology, because we weren't pursuing it, and some of our people, in order to continue their technology work, went to work, for example, in Great Britain with a little company called Surrey, and that became a pathway for the the Chinese, to gather some of the most important technologies that were produced in the SDI program. And now we today are playing catch up to the Chinese when it comes to space defense in particular, and a lot of other things as well, as you know.
Right. For the audience to understand, this is something you and I have worked, you worked longer than me, but I've been effectively working with you on this for about a little over 10 years. One of those things we did was do a conference where we linked cyber to EMP at the Center for Strategic Leadership and Development at the U.S. Army War College back when Tony Cuccolo, Major General Cuccolo was commandant. And we recognized then, working scenarios, what the worst case could happen. I'm looking back on this, and I think you all, and I've complimented you all on this before, Hank. The Reagan folks got it all right. You guys are amazing. You still are. You've always been able to establish an understanding of threat and work it. Why is it that other elements of the community don't seem to be able to grasp the importance of this issue, despite the fact that there's enough studies? We got the studies done, as you would, I think, agree with me. We understand the issue. Why is it even now we cannot get people to act with a concerted, factual response to plan for dealing with the loss of cyber? Because if you lose cyber, if you lose energy, bulk energy, EMP takes out energy. Everything now is digitized. Nothing will work without energy. So if you take out energy, you've lost digitization. Why is it nobody recognizes this as a strategic threat as we know it is?
Well, nobody's too strong a word. So, I have a lot of friends who've been trying to revive Reagan's vision,
right.
For 30 years. They were wedded to this idea of mutual assured destruction, and therefore they thought having a defense against ballistic missiles and against the threat was counterproductive, that it was unstable, they called it. It was destabilizing. And I just never agreed with that. Reagan didn't either.
Right.
And we haven't had a president since Reagan, though, that was willing to stand up and fight for this. President Trump at least made this a top priority, especially for the Navy. And he, of course, established a Space Force. But the future of that, I think, is questionable at this point. And it's a serious problem because, as you said, both EMP and cyber are considered to be serious threats today. What most people don't recognize is that EMP is a part of the military doctrine of Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And each of them consider to be EMP to be the most catastrophic ways to attack, carry out a cyber attack, not just as a preemptory measure, but because a single high altitude burst over the United States could shut down the entire electric power grid in the United States. And today, I hope we've maintained our key military systems in a protected state. But frankly, I don't know whether we have or not. The Department of Defense has very few really qualified technical people anymore.
Right.
Most of them are my vintage or older, if they're still living, of the ones who developed those methods and carried them out and so on. And the powers that be, including at so-called Homeland Security Department, have not paid attention to this issue, not the senior people. When this shows airs, I don't know whether Chris Krebs will still be around, but he was in charge of both the EMP issues and the cyber issues for the federal government, not the military, but our nuclear programs, our intelligence programs, and so on. And he claimed, as you may recall, that this was in the election the most secure ever, and which was nonsense. Right. I repeat. And regrettably, it became a political item so that the Democrats locked onto that and claimed there was no fraud, and everything else was exaggeration by the Republicans at the time, and turned it into a political fight. And so by the time this show is on the air, I hope we've done something about this. But frankly, as it stands, as we're recording it, I'm very fearful for the future of the country because we're not paying attention to a very real threat. And we're now locked into this political debate and fight while we do nothing to address it.
Hank, to that point regarding Krebs, and this is an issue that at time of taping, they've now recognized that a company called Solar Wind was essentially involved with a number of key government organizations, to everything from the Pentagon, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, to some of our nuclear programs under Krebs' watch. And somehow now we've come to find from DNI Radcliffe, these are all compromised. This it directly contradicts Krebs' contention that we have a very secure infrastructure. And I think from the DNI's comments to CBS correspondent Catherine Herridge during the interview, DNI Radcliffe specifically says that the elections were attacked by Russia, China, and Iran via cyber means. What do you make of this complete wholesale diminution of the threat by people like Krebs, who I would argue at this point are political figures, not anyone technically competent to hold the positions of authority they had? What do you make of this complete ignorance, or willing to be ignorant of these threats?
Well, I think it was quite deliberate on Krebs' part.
Yeah.
I'm willing to extend ignorance, and instead of saying it was malevolent, that he really wanted to harm the United States. I don't think he was competent. He's alleged to be very competent. I don't know what his background is.
He's a lawyer.
Some of it's legal, but he obviously knows nothing about the technology over which he was responsible. And frankly, I know firsthand because he blocked some of the people coming to South Carolina to look at what we're doing from the bottom up to protect the grid out of the Department of Homeland Security. That would have come and tried to connect us into the National Guard throughout the state, which is the infrastructure that I believe needs to be engaged to protect the American citizens against EMP. So I'll give him, the benefit of just saying he was ignorant, but he was in the top job, and in the sense of coordinating both the cyber world and not the military cyber. If we've got problems on the military side, that's DOD's clearly, but the Department of Energy and our nuclear programs, the nuclear laboratories, the intelligence community, NSA, and so on. He was allegedly orchestrating that world, and he spoke out and basically said, we know what we're doing, and they didn't. It's clear they didn't, and they didn't in the election either.
So that's, I guess, my last question to you. We've got to wrap it up here. What would be the three key things you'd like to see the London Center, in partnership with you, and we work with the federal government to address this coming year in 2021?
Well, I believe we've got to deal with the EMP issue. I think we need to couple EMP with cyber. Most people understand that cyber is a problem because everybody, it's obvious to them. In the case of EMP, they're fat, dumb, and happy mostly because, we haven't had an attack like that. And, World War II started with a great surprise, and we had time to repair, to rebuild our forces and get on top of the issue. If we have a major EMP attack, we're not going to have time to fix the electric power grid. We're going to be out, and within a year, just a societal collapse, never mind the disease and other issues, the lack of food and so on, starvation, most Americans are going to die. I mean, this is not a small threat. Without electricity, people die. They start dying in the hospitals without water, which you need electricity to pump, or without fuel to run the diesel generators that most places have at most a few days or weeks at best of fuel, and people die. Yeah. People in the hospital start dying within hours. And so most people are just, they're ignorant of this issue, and their government has let them down. Both parties. This is not only one party, it's both parties.
No, I'm with you, Hank. And to that point, if I were a bad guy, I'd find a way to launch off a nuke over the eastern seaboard during a blizzard. During a blizzard, when everything is needed, you take out the power grid, you take out first responders, you're going to have a lot of people very quickly succumbing to the cold and a number of other things. I've lived here in Northern Virginia for, I think, 5 days without power one time during a blizzard. And I cannot imagine that being extended over weeks and people having to cope with no food, no transportation, and having to move around. And I think this is where, if I can think of this, bad guys can think of it too. And I think that's what we have to understand is that, by the way, for those of the audience to understand, the Pearl Harbor attack was actually envisioned. Nobody could believe it was possible. There was a number of of things that were postulated by the Army and Navy both, saying, well, this could happen, but everybody dismissed it as impractical. In this case, Hank, I don't think what we're talking about is impractical. It's something that I would almost argue is foreseeable if we don't get our act together.
Well, I agree. And frankly, Billy Mitchell predicted Pearl Harbor specifically 30 years before it happened. And he was court-martialed because in those days he was arguing for air power, and neither the Army, and the Army, it was where the Air Force or Air Corps in those days was located, paid any attention to him. And the Navy, of course, really was outraged when he destroyed, I believe it was a destroyer, or I don't remember.
Battleship. No, he bombed an old German battleship, as I recall.
Right, from the air.
Yeah.
And so they court-martialed him. Harry Truman promoted him after he died to a major general, back to general officer status, and restored half of his retirement pay, I guess, to his family, because he died as, I don't remember what his rank was reduced, and whatever his retirement was. So that's the way we pay our visionaries, and we don't pay attention to them. And we had time, though, after Pearl Harbor to pick up the pieces, and we had an industrial base that produced everything we needed. I remember those days. I was just a little fellow, but the soldiers drilled with broomsticks because they didn't have rifles. They had to give the rifles to the ones that were going to fight. And we were able in less than 5 years, 4.5 years, to win that war. But it was months before, we had Midway that turned the battle in the Pacific.
Right.
And it had 3 years after that before we got around to it in Europe.
Right.
We're not going to have that kind of luxury in the modern electronic age. It's going to be over in a hurry.
So that's two other points I'd like to make. I think we should pursue in the new year, to continue your point, is Space Force. The Russians and Chinese both have invested in counter-satellite, anti-satellite weapons that would take out our GPS and low Earth orbital communications capabilities. Hank, how does the left not recognize this as a vulnerability, and we should deal with it?
Well, I don't know. We don't like in this country to deal with a problem until we're hit in the head. My dad used to say, I grew up on a farm and we used mules, and he broke his wrist once hitting a mule in the head to get his attention, or her attention actually, because it's a jackass if it's a he. But anyway,
you're not talking about the president-elect, are you? No, I'm just a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. So I shouldn't say anything like that.
No, I'm talking about life on the farm, 80 years ago. But anyway, we just don't pay attention to something until we're hit with it. We don't like to presume that we have enemies, and we clearly do. We want to believe that you can just get along, go along. And I want to believe that too, but that isn't the way the world works.
Well, I think in the new year, Hank, one of the things, the third point I think we could both agree on then is trying to work to create at least partnerships within the states to create a tapestry of resilience, because I think some states, like your state, South Carolina, I've had talks here in Virginia with the Adjutant General. I think certain states have to figure, if the federal government can't do it under Title 10 or Title 50, we have to have the Title 32, the states, essentially the National Guard, find a way to protect their own interests. So I think that's another area we should definitely focus on. So
I absolutely agree with you. I believe that is the pathway forward. If we don't work this from the bottom up, I don't think it's going to get worked. Washington is just broken badly, and I don't care who's in power.
Right. Well, Hank, Ambassador Cooper, thank you for joining me today on this thought to action. This is clearly something we have been thinking a lot about and trying to take action on for longer than the London Center's existence. So I always appreciate your friendship, guidance, and mentorship, because clearly, I've done everything I can, and I like to believe that the London Center will continue to do everything it can to emulate the basic premises of the Reagan defense policies and wisdom that you and Bud McFarland and others maintain. So thanks for being on today. And thank you for watching and listening to Thought to Action. If you like our program and would like to help expand and create more content, please join our Patreon community at youtube.com Thought to Action, where you can preview Thought to Action before everyone else see our show. We also offer exclusive content to include Ask Us Anything, the Q&A sessions that we now produce, and other interesting videos and perks. So, and please subscribe to Thought to Action on YouTube, and you will find us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So again, thank you today for joining us, and we look forward to you all joining us again for Thought to Action in the very near future.